Boy, I've been hearing some foolishness from the grapevine. I've been hearing something about throwing upgrades on Termaga. Gants. What's this foolishness you talking, boy? So, as you can see, we ended up starting with finishing off our 20-man squad. Be boosted to 30 by the time I'm finished painting and assembling some models, but right now, it's naturally a half-decent playable squad. To allude back to the earlier comment, it was something I was listening to, well, a few tactical videos, and something really stood out for me. Primarily, I keep hearing, oh, you want to end up throwing in a few Devourers in amongst the gaunts. And, you know, maybe a 50-50 split. Have the flesh borer, have Termagants holding the front while those in the back are using Devourers. Makes sense. You know, the flesh borers take the head damage and all that kind of business. But I think it comes down to understanding what your army actually does. And this goes by list basis, of course. See, I have this knee-jerk reaction to somebody just asked me to put upgrades on a troop I consider a throwaway. And I very much consider Termagants to be the throwaway unit. Hormagaunts in close second. I'll throw them away if I have to. I'd rather not. But hear me out. The way I typically end up playing these guys is I advance them up the board. I don't hold them back to hold an objective. If they survive long enough to be whittled down to like a 5-10-man squad, sure. Unlikely as that is. And I'll tell you why. The fact of the matter is that at base cost, they are remarkably cheap for a squad. And I like to take big squads. 25 is actually the minimum that I prefer. I've been running these guys as 20. Doesn't quite hold up quite as well as I'd like. But at 25 to 30, you have an assault weapon. You have the ability to keep running forward and crashing the lines. But Derek, these aren't a melee troop. Fair enough, but I've never really considered them a shooting troop either. Now, granted, with the upgrades, you can probably make them as such, but they die in droves. I mean, some really good focused firepower will bring them down. On the other hand, if, at least the way I end up playing them, I throw them into units that don't want to be tied up in combat. And I let that combat drag. If I can find a 10-man tactical squad, yeah, my Termagants are going to be in that squad, no question. And they're going to lose. However, it's going to take 2 or 3 turns for them to lose. Meanwhile, that lone rocket launcher that they end up having isn't blasting at my monstrous creatures. And that's the biggest thing I think Termagants can end up giving you, is that board control. You want to drown them in bodies. For me, I like playing my large swarm style. As many bodies on the field as I can fit. Now, I've been trying to pull away from that just to get a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more play experience with other models. But I have no doubt that if you give me the option, it's going to be 2 large squads of Termagants, 2 large squads of Hormagaunts, 2 groups of warriors, group of gargoyles, and as many bodies as I can physically fit on the table, with overlapping synapse being primarily through warriors, Termagants, Hive Tyrant, Zoanthropes, whatever I can fit. But the basic concept just comes down to drown out a portion of their army. For the amount of points that I end up spending on a typical unit, I figure why not? I mean, if one of these units can put a heavy firepower unit out of the game for 2 rounds, 2 rounds of shooting. In those 2 rounds of shooting, I'm allowed to cherry pick everything else. And I control the tempo of the game. Orcs do the same thing, though more often than not everybody's worried about getting overrun. It's not the overrun that's the worry more often than not. It's the fact that you have this green tide that slams to your lines, does a fair amount of damage, but is mostly softening it up for everything else that comes up behind that just eats unit after unit after unit. You know, and there's something to be said about that style of play. Tyranids can do it in abundance, but the thing is Tyranids have the ability to remake some of their swarms. They can throw in a whole nother line of gaunts at you to just keep bogging things down. And if they do survive, you can pull them back and say, here's a 5-man squad. Well, yeah, it doesn't take a lot of firepower to dedicate to killing it, but usually the enemy will overkill it in that regard. You know, here's a 5-man Termaga squad. What's left of it? Well, congratulations, you did 12 wounds because, you know, no armor save and, well, toughness 3 speaks for itself. But those wounds aren't going anyplace else. Meanwhile, everything else you end up having, in my case, it's Zoanthropes, Moloch, Trigon, and if everything works out, I should have a kit finished up for a, well, you know the standard, the loadouts. They have wings, whole bunch of DACA. We know how this goes. And the thing is I don't feel comfortable giving any kind of upgrades to a troop I'm specifically using as a tie-up. Especially if you have, like, 4 squads of gaunts. It doesn't matter if it's Hormagaunt or Termagaunt. There's a certain degree of flexibility. It drags the eye. I can guarantee you my Hormagaunts are getting shot before my Termagaunts. Not always a good idea, but there it is. Same thing with my Hormagaunts. If my Hormagaunts are designed to butcher things left, right, and center, yeah, sure. I'll end up throwing on maybe some poison on those talents. But my experience has been keep everything with minimal upgrades. Quantity over quality. And leverage that advantage. Now, I could be missing something huge, no question. But my experience has been... Well, my experience primarily actually comes from fantasy. I do quite well there, primarily with vampire counts. Again, a horde army. I've just been playing them for almost as long as I've been playing Tyranids. But my success rate with them is astonishingly better, mostly because I can control the field. And I'm just really starting to grasp how to do that with Tyranids. And the more I think about it, the more I think we need more bodies. I mean, it gets to the point where I actually want to drown my opponent across the table. Not his army. I want to drown the opponent in nothing but chitin, fangs, teeth, and biomorph weapons. So much plastic moving across the table, he's going to be convinced that there's portions of the terrain that are coming for him. In reality, that's not the playmat, that's the swarm. I'm currently looking into getting stuff like, what is it, the Endless Swarm. Sorry, I've been out of the game for a little while, boys. I gotta end up catching up. Data slates and all this kind of stuff. You know, whatever happened when it was in the codex, it was in the codex, it was in the codex. Now it's... I bought a codex and it apparently has 1/4 of the units and options I actually have available in my army. Go figure. But that's another rant for another day. Suffice to say, Termagants. or Gantz for the newer players. You're going to end up running into situations where think on what you need them to do in your army. Maybe my method isn't the best one for your approach. My approach requires bogging stuff down, choking lanes with bodies, making sure that that large swarm garners so much attention that everything else just kind of moves on. And it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're shooting at them, everything else is coming out fresh. If you're not shooting at them, well, you only have so much time before you get tarpitted. That being said, before we leave, here is what we're going to be doing next. That's right, we got Gene Stealers coming up next. Now, in this video, we talked about tar pitting with termagants. These guys change it from a tar pit into a mosh pit. See you guys next time.